Hello, and welcome to another episode of
The Super Data Brothers Super Show.
That's right. I am Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are two real life brothers who work in the data and analytics industry. And have we got a good one for you today, folks?
Boy, do we. You know, Ryan, I'm so excited for today's show because today we are talking to an expert on data team decentralization. We're talking to Anna Bergevin. I'm in charge of a data team as of 2 months ago, reorg, and I'm in charge of a data team on top of the reporting team. That's how it goes. So this is just a very interesting topic for me. So I'm sure there's lots of wisdom I can glean from this. And if you're watching, I'm sure there's lots of wisdom you can glean from this as well.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of really awesome stuff we can cover today. And I'm really excited to talk to Anna. Of course, folks, this is a live show. So it's more fun for you and it's more fun for us if you get your questions, comments, and reactions into the chat. And of course, if you let us know where you're watching from, we will always give you a shout out. So without further delay, let's welcome Anna to the show and kick things off.
Yep. And quick note, I'm having some mic issues, so my source may change or I may leave and come back as this.
That's why he sounds like he's in a tin can right now. Okay, Anna, welcome to the Super Data Brothers show. It's good to have you.
Hi, nice to see you guys.
So, the topic of today's show, I think we're going to cover data team decentralization, data products, data mesh. I'm sure we'll talk about AI. Before we dive into all that stuff, why don't you give us a little bit of info about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like many product managers, I have a kind of non-traditional weaving background, but to summarize it, I got my bachelor's degree in political science and my master's in public policy. I worked for about a decade in nonpartisan public policy research. And then I transitioned into tech, was working at a startup wearing a lot of hats, including as an analyst. That's where I learned SQL by being thrown into the deep end and, learned BigQuery and cloud computing. I moved on to a larger tech company. That's where I first became familiar with product. I was an analyst there. And then I made the transition to product while at that company. Had a couple product roles and then landed here where I am now at ResMed. ResMed's a med tech company that builds CPAPs and ventilators, helps people sleep better and breathe better and live healthier lives. We have hardware, software, connected devices, millions of people worldwide on our devices. There's a lot of data. And so I'm working on the data platform and bringing that product perspective to the team.
Awesome. Let's give a couple shout outs here. So we've got friend of the show. This says LinkedIn user. This is Tom Wilsek watching from Chicago. Good to have you here, Tom. Paul Weber tuning in from San Diego and Andrew Jones watching from London. So we have a world spanning audience here on the Super Data Brothers show. So Anna, let's start with you kind of said you do product management for a data platform. So what is that? What does that mean to you and in your everyday role? What sort of things do you handle?
Yeah, it's a real mix of things. So at ResMed, we have a hub and spoke model with our data team, right? So we have centralized data engineering. There's another hub that is our data science group, several analyst groups. ResMed is also very geographically distributed. We have a headquarters in San Diego. Paul here on the chat is actually another product manager who was recently at ResMed. And Paul's great. So yeah, at ResMed, we have people in San Diego. I'm actually remote. I'm in Utah. We have people in almost every time zone. So we're working in a very distributed fashion. And the data platform itself, our mission is to provide insights and support AI ML initiatives across the company. And that means bringing a lot of data together. ResMed's a 35-year-old company, so we're dealing with a lot of on-prem to cloud migrations, bringing in new sources, figuring out curation, figuring out which BI tooling. When I came in, we had 7 BI tools at ResMed. We're really trying to normalize and consolidate, and then saying how do all these pieces fit together to deliver capabilities? So it's do we have a semantic layer between our warehouse and our platform? Are we in a multi-cloud environment or do we just stick with Snowflake? How do we handle non-structured data or less structured data like JSON and then flat tables? And how do all these things come together? And then also working with our partners in the business to say, what does it mean to manage knowledge at scale? And what does it mean to deliver that for the business? And how do we make it easy for end users, meaning anyone in the business, including analysts or their business stakeholders, to find the data they need, to get the answers they need. So we have both operational analytics. So that means a team like our CPAPs have software on the device. We have to roll out updates over the cloud. They might be monitoring how that rollout, the over-the-air rollout is going. Or we might have analytics like our product team saying what features are users using within our software, how's this adoption going. So typical SaaS stuff, hardware stuff, manufacturing stuff. It's a really interesting business. There's so many different verticals to it.
Anna, now that you mention it, I think if I were to go back in time like a decade, ResMed was a client of mine when I was a Cognos consultant.
Oh, yes, we still have Cognos.
Yeah.
Maybe not forever, but we do it now.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's I don't know why that hadn't occurred to me till just now, but as you're talking, I was like, wait a minute, I actually remember working with ResMed a long time ago. So a couple of things that I think I'm really excited and interested in your perspective on. The first one is like this. Okay, so you're a product manager in data. You talked a lot about the platform you're managing and that sort of thing. Is your team taking kind of a data product approach? Do you have something that you call a data product within ResMed? And if so, what is that thing? This is like a huge debate, is like, what is a data product? Nobody can even decide. So I'm really curious where you are in that journey.
Well, my philosophical perspective on that discussion topic is it's really more about the method or approach we use to define how we build. That is product thinking, right? It's user-centric, it's data-backed, it's iterative. We build small, we move quickly, and thinking more about a cohesive, scalable vision of like how we use data versus just a one-off project basis. So that's really how I think about it. When it comes to products, it's interesting because the platform itself, you could call a product or a set of capabilities and products, has a lot of features to it. And then there's also, we do have analytics engineering is centralized at ResMed. And so our analytics engineers are delivering, actual data sets or data marts that are curated and documented and specific to serving certain use cases. But you could also say that those end dashboards, which our team largely does not build, are built by analysts, are also data products. So it's more about, we are not first in, first out. We are strategic. We prioritize our data work according to the company strategy, and we try to build products that scale rather than constant bespoke, more like a consultancy or a service org would.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe where part of the decentralization piece comes in. As you mentioned, analytics engineering is centralized at ResMed, but that the actual content creation, the dashboard creation, is not happening necessarily on that centralized team. So what is that like? What's the topology of the data practice there, and who's doing what?
Yeah, so I would say our analysts are embedded within the business unit. When I was an analyst, that was also the model I worked under. And so their job is really to understand how data could be leveraged in their business unit and to work with their stakeholders to understand, we could have a dashboard for this, or ideally we might have a burst report, coming out of another tool versus a dashboard, or we need to, we even have dashboards on our manufacturing floors in our factories that they're using to monitor in quite rapid fashion, like how things are coming off the line. So there's like people in the business who are working with these stakeholders to understand what their pain points are and how data can help solve them. And then they partner with us to say, okay, we need to get all the data in one place. So we even could stitch it together, right? So there's ingestion work, or we might say, look, that's a lot of data to compute in the BI tool, right? If you're sucking too much data into the BI tool, it can really slow things down. It's also and then asking them things like, who else might need this metric, or who else might need this data set? Because if you do too much of the work shifted right in the BI layer, then if another team wants to report on that same metric, they can't do that because you haven't. So it's like talking to them about like, how critical is a metric? So a lot of this, since I've joined ResMed 2 years ago, is like working with our analyst teams to develop that vision of where the division of labor is. And it really varies. So if we have a critical metric, like let's say gross margin, lifetime value, some of these big KPIs, right? We may not want to do that in one analyst dashboard that they built on their machine that isn't under version control, et cetera. We might say, okay, the central data team, the analytics engineers are actually going to build that time series in a mart, and then multiple teams can consume it, versus some team wants to have a little KPI for their team of 5 we don't need to be involved in that. Like that would be a waste of our time. So there's different tiers or different layers of involvement. It's not a clear cut and dry for all things. This is where it's like, where does the robustness, the observability, the like data engineering practice become more useful? And it's when it comes to the criticality, the low SLA, all those things is where we might get more involved, but we still aren't the decision maker about how that metric is defined, right? So when we go to build it, we still need to work with that analyst and their business leaders to say, should we include or exclude this subsegment, or we ran into this weird edge case? How do you want us to handle that? That's really not our decision. It's a business decision. So it's very collaborative and a little bit fluid.
Yeah. How do you, are there any particular approaches you take to managing that? Because I think we have this idea that we talk about sometimes about, there's this tendency on data teams, I think, where metrics and data often flows in one direction. It goes from source systems to some kind of data warehouse, out to some BI or visualization tool, and then out to Excel, and then out to and then out to the end consumption point. And many data teams are just set up to be this service org where it's like, we're just going to pump stuff out. We're going to pump stuff out. But what you're talking about is also keeping track of what people are doing out there. And when something useful pops up, bringing it back in, right? Someone has identified some useful metric, and we're not going to let it live in a Cognos burst report or in a Power BI dashboard. It needs to come back into some centralized metrics store. And this is, in my opinion, this is the number one skill that data teams currently lack, that they need to develop. They need to get this muscle of seeing what's going on in their user community and recognizing when a useful metric has been created and pulling it back so that other teams can use it. How do you guys manage that process?
So that's really where product becomes helpful, right? It's not my engineer's job to keep track of the company strategy and how that interfaces with the requests that are coming in. Also, I have to keep track of, like, I see things strategically coming and they haven't called data out as a dependency. And I'm like, oh, I know you're going to come to me and be like, in 2 weeks, I need this up and running. And so I have to get in there and be like, hold up, you're probably going to want a dashboard. And they're like, oh yeah, we definitely will want a dashboard when this project launches. And I'm like, okay, like that data doesn't magically appear in the warehouse. So like, we got to talk about this. So it's both proactive and reactive. And then bringing that all in and saying, here are all the things that we could build. It's always more than our capacity. So where are the commonalities, right? 2 different requests may end up, right now we have a request from product and a request from marketing that ended up both needing a customer data platform, a CDP solution actually ends up serving both use cases, right? So it's like, we don't handle each use case in a silo is one thing. And then the other part is, when I was an analyst, I worked on a really critical model at my business. And I remember being like, should we be doing some like peer review? Should someone double check this code? Like, it felt like a lot of pressure for me to like hope I hadn't missed a group by or screwed up like with my parentheses, or just like conceptually hadn't considered something. So when we have all our analysts working in one-off ways, we're not getting version control, we're not getting peer review. Like when you get software engineering, right? Someone reviews your pull request and says, you forgot about this, or you're missing test coverage, or I think you didn't see this edge case. So in data, we don't really have that. But one way we can have that, and something that I'm interested in, is analysts have to move fast. Like their boss needs an answer today, regardless of whether the pipeline exists. They may have to go pull it manually, they may have to get scrappy. But so that I view them as prototyping. They're going out, they're meeting with the business, they're figuring out what it means, they're seeing what the data's shape actually is. So when they bring it to us, we might say, okay, but now all these other teams need it. If it's really critical, it's high risk to have it be on one analyst, all in their head, probably not well documented, right? In the BI layer, in a notebook. We're like, how do we bring this so it's more documented, more version controlled? Our team's going to review it because we have to rebuild it. We might catch something you didn't catch the first time around. I view it as like a prototyping and a hardening off when it comes back to our team. And so that's how I say it. We don't want to slow down our analysts. We don't want them to have to wait. We know we're slower than they are because our requirements are different than theirs are. So our analysts move fast and then we harden things off. And that's the pattern I want, is that back and forth of they're the trailblazers, they're the gathering of the context, and then we are the methodical hardening off and maturation of it. And that's not worth doing for everything, but it is worth doing for certain things.
Yeah, that's I think that's a really great way to conceive of it, as like the analysts are moving fast and prototyping. And then out of presumably some large volume of analyst work that's being done, what your team's job is to do is to identify the stuff that needs to be elevated out of that, that has criticality or SLAs, or it takes too long. Even performance is not good enough in a BI desktop BI tool or something like that. Do we have a comment from Paul? He asks, how does feedback about the quality of the metric get handled? What happens when the metric is no longer useful? And how do you manage cleanup of the metric data? And this is another thing. This is a great question, Paul, because I think we definitely have a habit in data of producing a lot of things and then never getting rid of them. Yeah, that's where you get the Tableau environment with 10,000 dashboards that
10,000
nobody
dashboards,
views.
10,000 tables feeding 10,000 dashboards.
Right. So how do you think about metric lifecycle or asset lifecycle, and how do you go about, or do you go about sunsetting those assets when they're no longer useful?
I would say this is a developing area for our team, as it is for all teams. But we're doing things like saying, there's two parts to Paul's question. So I'll handle the second part first, of how the life cycle and how we manage things, and the quality question is separate. But if it's not being used, that's a signal that it might not be valuable to the business. So we actually look at just traffic. Now, a dashboard that gets used once a quarter, but is critical to financially closing the books for that quarter, is still useful. So what traffic is useful is variable. So we're looking at how we can set up some automated processes that go through and say, hey, no one has visited this dashboard in 6 months. Is this still a thing? And then working with the owners of those dashboards to sunset it, or we might be like, well, why isn't anyone using it? Was a dashboard really the right way? Do we need a bot that posts in Teams or Slack that's just an update? Is there a reason people aren't coming in? So we think about that way. I also look at things like the warehouse access logs to be which of our curated assets are getting used. We're looking at things like comparing usage against costs. So we're starting to build some cost models to be this pipeline is costing us X amount, and one person uses it ever. Maybe that's not the right thing, or maybe it is worth all of that. But it brings up maybe the discussion points for investigation. So I would say you can't fully automate it, but you can create models that inform you and have operating cadences where you review these and have discussions. But you have to actively manage it. I personally love killing things. I love cleaning up clutter. So for me, I'm very motivated and interested in this task, but not everybody is. Some people are just very driven by building the next new shiny thing. So I think you have to build it in as an operating rhythm so that it kind of has a forcing function of hey, this is our quarterly cleanup. We sent out all these automated emails. This is who we heard back from. We didn't hear back from these people. We're going to follow up, and we're going to kill things. And then when we actually do end of life things, we have a lot of change management around that, right? So we might first communicate, this is ending, reach out if you need help migrating to this other source or this other data product. If we don't hear back, then we turn off the ETL pipelines, but we leave the asset live, or we might change the name of the asset so that things break. And then when someone hollers, we just change the name back so it unbreaks. We have different ways to try to progressively get to deprecation, and then we can finally kill it and know it's not needed. But basically you have to save bandwidth for cleanup, or things just grow to where you might have, let's say, more data sources on your BI layer than users of that BI layer, which is maybe not efficient. And on the quality side, really the business analysts or the end user should be the one who is getting the feedback on that quality, right? Or hearing back, this metric doesn't resonate with me. This doesn't fit my anecdotal experience. I had this experience as an analyst where I had a model and people were like, we don't believe this. The model was what tech skills are in demand, because I was working for an ed tech platform, so they knew what courses to build. And it was C, and they're like, no, this is probably C# or some other language. And I was like, no, the model pulled from job listings, and I had to go pull raw job listings and send them to curriculum and be like, this is what the job listing says. And they were like, huh, people are still learning C out there and hiring for it. And yeah, there's legacy platforms, you guys. So the analyst is the one who really needs to be seeking that feedback and handling it, and then modifying accordingly.
I can remember a time when we were doing it was a Cognos upgrade long ago, and we proactively went out and asked everybody, what of all this content, we came up with spreadsheets using the Cognos audit information of who's using what, and we sent everybody a spreadsheet and said, tell us what you need. And what ended up happening is everybody needed everything. And so we would have had to, migrate 20,000 reports. So instead, we just looked at the usage data, migrated the top 1,500 or something like that. And the rest of them we just left behind. So if you logged into the new environment, they just weren't there. We told everybody this, and we said, hey, if you can't find something, let us know. And it was like 7, that someone was like, oh, actually I need that thing. And the other 18,000 or whatever it was, we just ditched.
Absolutely. That's where product management really comes in, is how you frame questions, right? Are you getting confirmation bias? Are you getting actual answers about, like, oh, would you guys like it if we built this thing? And everyone's like, I mean, sure, that sounds like a good thing. That doesn't mean they'll use it, right? Like, so you got to elicit that feedback very carefully.
And back in the day, like, we weren't thinking about that at all. Like we thought about what content was used at upgrade or migration time, because it would make work for us to have to upgrade or migrate the assets. And then after the migration, okay, we're on this new version for the next 3 years. We didn't think about it at all again. Who's actually using what? It just was not part of the practice of being on a data warehouse BI team in 2009, to think about those sorts of things. Where do you were an analyst, and then you went into full-blown product, kind of out of data, and then you came back to data.
Yep.
What skills did you learn in the product world that you think were useful or help you now that you're coming back to be on a data team?
I mean, one of the biggest things is I really started to understand product managers and product teams as a key data consumer, right? Understood their pain points and what they're going for. But from a practice perspective, I used to be very solution focused, right? As an analyst. And it's like, oh, you have a problem? I could build something to help with that, right? And that's definitely what we see with engineering a lot, is jumping straight to solutioning. And product really taught me to be patient with the problem and making sure I understood the problem deeply. And that would be good for any data professional. But product, it's very much a practice of someone says, well, I think I need this dashboard. And you're like, tell me more about that. Why do you think you need a dashboard? Rather than going, okay, well, what dashboard should we build? You're like, oh, so what you really want to know is whether something has gone out of range. If it hasn't, you don't care. But if it does go out of range, you need to be alerted. Do you really want to have to check a dashboard every day for that? Or do you just want us to ping you if it goes out of range? And otherwise you can forget about it. And they're like, well, yeah, that would be awesome. Because people don't know what they want. And that's what product management definitely teaches you too, is people want to be helpful. So when you're interviewing users, they're going to come in and they're going to have their pain point, and they're going to be like, if you would just build X, it would make my life so much easier. And that might be the right thing. But you might be like, tell me why you think that would make things easier. And they're like, well, right now I have to export the data, and then I have to manipulate it in Excel, and then I have to re-upload it. You're like, oh, well, we could just do that manipulation for you and produce the end table. And they're like, oh, well, yeah. So I don't need a download to Excel button anymore, right? So, or maybe they do. So yeah, product really taught me to sit with the pain point and really probe on that problem, and also to listen better, to just like let the silence sit, to listen, to ask follow-up questions, to not just accept the first answer. And then, yeah, the prototype, ship small, ship fast, ship often, cycling of, like, as an analyst, you might get in a model assigned to you and you really like deeply think about it and make it as robust as you can, and then you release it, right? Product teams are very much like, what's the smallest thing we could build to get feedback, right? And then build better. So it's really helped me learn to break down. I might still have the same vision for where we're headed, but I'm not going to spend 6 months building that thing. We want to build this thing, get feedback, build the next thing, get feedback.
Do you think, like, how is this transition been at ResMed, and how far along is your team into it? Like, presumably, and from what I recall, we were not working this way, a decade ago.
No.
So how far along on this transition is the team? Like, do you feel you guys have fully embraced this way of working, or is it still a work in progress?
So ResMed is a pretty large business. over 4 billion a year in revenue, 10,000 employees, very distributed, all these different verticals, all these different data needs. So I would say for the whole big picture of like what it means to do data at scale and do it well, we're in the middle, somewhere in the messy middle of that transition, right? Like when I joined, we were still migrating to the cloud from on-prem, right? We still have a Cognos on-prem BI solution is one of our BI solutions. Tableau, we migrated from on-prem to the cloud during the time I've been here, right? We had 7 BI tools. It's probably not the long ideal vision. So ResMed's kind of in the middle, but the way of working of bringing in product, I was hired a little over 2 years ago, and the CTO at the time was introducing the idea of product management within, just say enterprise IT teams, the data team, like not just in digital SaaS, but we might have product management as a practice within the enterprise. And so I joined. And then it was my first data platform gig. So I was figuring it out right alongside the other PMs on my team. Right now, I'm the only PM. We've had some reorging. We will be hiring, getting people in the right geographic locations and things. But it's still a practice. It's still figuring out with making sure, and not everyone has the same vision. So it's a lot of like, I don't want to call it sales, but vision building and adapting my vision to kind of compromise and to figure out what the long-term path is. But yeah, it's very much an ongoing evolution.
Got a couple comments here real quick. Aaron, welcome to the show. Aaron Wilkerson is a friend of the show and one of our only other Detroit area LinkedIn data celebrities. So good to have you, Aaron. And then Andrew Jones says, love this. Similar to ideas like start with why or 5 whys. Keep asking until you know the problem you need to solve. One of the things we always say on the show here is begin with the end in mind. And that end is often not the first thing someone told you they needed, right? It's that first, when someone says, hey, I have this problem, or you go to them and you say, what problems can I solve for you? That very first thing they say, very rarely is that actually the end of the story.
Yeah. And also, whoever's the loudest doesn't mean their thing is the most important thing for the business. So you really have to balance the person who is loudly shouting for their data solution against the people who haven't even realized that they have a data dependency, but they're working on a big strategic project. And I have to go, drag it out of them. Hey, we should talk about this. Or so it's a lot. It's a lot to figure out what the right thing is to build, prioritize it for the business, and make sure we haven't jumped to just the first solution we thought of. And that gets into engineering and technical design as well. Of like, oh, well, we could build it this way, or we could build this other way, or, you have to consider. There's a practice and product called opportunity solution mapping that Teresa Torres in the product community came up with. And it's where you start with all the user pain points, which are opportunities for impact, right? And then you say, what are the solutions we could build? And the goal is to brainstorm every solution you can think of to all these opportunities. And then to say, which of these solutions might, tackle more than one opportunity, which of these is the optimal solution. But the goal is to not just jump into that first solution, call it good and move on, but to really think deeply as a team about it and then have a much clearer vision of what you're building and why you're building it.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm curious about too is, you've mentioned a few times being proactive, I think, about, knowing some strategic initiative or important project is going on and going to them, not waiting for them to come to you and say, oh, we realized we need some data stuff done, but proactively going out to them and getting involved. And I can remember times in my career where, I knew somebody was going to need something, and they put all their thought into how do we get the data into new system X. And then at the end of the project, they were like, oh, wait, we got to get the data out too. It's like classic IT team doing stuff as you get the DBAs and the whoever, and all they're thinking about is like the operational system. How do you, but I think that actually requires a degree of confidence and trust to just insert yourself into, to say, hey guys, I think you need us, and I'm going to tell you why. How do you develop that? Let's say you're on a data team right now and you're not viewed as the kind of partner who can just self-invite to the meeting to say, let's talk about your data needs? How would you recommend building that?
Oh, it really depends on how your company plans. So part of how I get insight into the strategy is we have a quarterly planning cadence, right? It's at every company I've been at, it's like I'm in every Slack channel, or ResMed has Slack and Teams. I'm in every channel I can be to creep on the business, if that makes sense, to be like, oh, sales is working on this thing, or product is working on this thing, like to stay broadly aware of what's being worked on. And then a lot of times the people in charge of those things are not incredibly data literate. Like they're very smart and they want to be data driven. When I say not data literate, I mean they literally don't understand, like, events don't just appear in the warehouse unless your software engineering team instrumented events. Like you have to tell them, like, so it's starting to help product managers understand, hey, you need to sit down with your dev team and make sure your dev team knows what you want to measure at the end of the day. I was in a meeting where I encouraged them to have this meeting. They invited me and I was in this meeting and I watched the product manager and the analyst talking through what they wanted to measure, what they were hoping to understand at the end of this new product launch. And then saying to the engineering team, like, okay, so are we able to do all this? And they're like, no, we haven't instrumented any of those events. Like, we're going to have to take 2 more sprints to do this. Like, so it's like an ongoing relationship building, coming in as a partner, really trying to set the tone of, I don't want to tell you what to do, but I know you're going to have data needs. Let's talk this out. Let's talk about your roadmap. Let's talk about what's going on. And then there's a lot of educating, right? Like, okay, so that data won't exist unless your engineers create it, or that data is not hooked up to our warehouse yet, which means it won't be accessible to dashboards. Like a lot of people, data is a black box to them. It's magic. It's like they see a dashboard, but they do not understand the piping that brought it there. So it's educating of like, okay, this thing doesn't exist yet. This is how we're going to have to go get it. Or the data's not clean. This data's super messy. We need to add some validation on the entry end. So it's a lot of like helping them connect the dots between the outcome they want and the data work that they need to plan for on their own and with our team to get there. So I think the goal is like you just become a very helpful person, standard relationship building, right? Become friends with people and look for critical wins. You're not going to be able to develop those relationships with everybody at the same time, at least not in a business the scale we are. It's been find those key people, and plus it's always good to have friends at work. So, set up virtual coffees, just build friendships, be part of mentorship programs, like ways that you just start getting yourself hooked into the branches of the business.
Gotcha. Ryan, that reminds me, what's the #1 data book of 2024?
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yep. It was a top data book. It's been the top data book for 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah, these are the classic soft skills, right? That people are always talking about on LinkedIn, right? It's it's the #1 data skill is actually soft skills, and I think this is why. This is exactly why. Your technical skills will help you enormously; they're important in like a moment to moment fashion. But the long term trajectory of your career, of your data team, is as or more defined by your ability to understand and deliver needs as it is your ability to like, oh yeah, the pipeline's highly efficient.
Yeah.
Well, and as we see AI coming on, AI is not automating soft skills, at least not yet. Right. It's so if you want to future proof your career, it's being alone, just churning out code to like write SQL queries. That's getting more and more automated. That's not the value add. I mean, that still needs to happen, but we're getting to a point where if we build our structure and our platform the right way, we can use robots to help speed that part up, the actual writing of the code. But the taking ambiguity and bringing together a plan, AI can help with that, but it's not going to fly solo and do it correctly. So that's where the value, that's where the future is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very much a, AI can give you an okay answer in ambiguous situations. I find like it can give you the answer that if, like the most middle of the road, it's acceptable, but not creative. Whereas, I mean, it can write SQL pretty well. We do have a question here. Andrew Jones, and we'll get back to AI because I think it's a big topic, but Andrew asks, why do you think it's only recently that product thinking has been applied to data?
It's a good question. I think that, data teams, historically, well, part of this is organizationally. data teams are often embedded under IT, maybe if you're lucky under a CDO, a chief data officer, but like often buried under IT just because there needs to be technical people to hook up databases and systems. So that means that it's far from the product org. Like, so people, it's actually very interesting to me at the intersection of data and product to see how much my data friends have no clue what like product thinking or product approach is. And my product friends have no clue how data works. And yes, there are people in the middle, but they're very separate professional silos, if that makes sense. So it's almost like, well, until some people started switching from data to product, or maybe even product to data, but less commonly, how were these schools of thought going to cross-pollinate? They just aren't even talking to each other. And then more and more they started to, right? Especially as we started to build products that had to have machine learning models and data, and then you started having data and product start talking more. And at some point, leadership started saying, hey, what if this approach to thinking about data could be managed less as a project, less as a how much can we get done in how much time, and more about being strategic. There's also a lot of pressure on data teams now to prove ROI. I don't actually get asked a lot to prove like do business cases that are like mathy and actually prove ROI, but you have to be working on such valuable things that your value is not questioned, right? And so if you're not being strategic, if you're not being proactive about it, you may end up working on low value stuff, and people are like, what is even this giant team doing? What do you guys even do? Versus, I don't know, like those guys, got all this data together for us so we could train this model that we just pushed out that's bringing in X million of dollars. Like, you don't have to build an ROI business case if your value is obvious. So anyhow, I think all of this is just that pressure has all meant that some people started experimenting with data product management. And when people started talking about it and seeing value in it, it's taken off a little bit. I say a little bit because like you can go on LinkedIn and search for data product managers, and it's still not a super common skill set or role.
Do you think that the popularity of data mesh has had anything to do with it?
I mean, definitely introduced the term data product and set a lot of people off on a discussion of what is a data product, what does data product mean? But all that was happening far away from product management. Product management was not involved in data mesh. But when somebody said, oh, should we have a product manager? When I landed in this role, which, like I said, our CTO was like, we should bring product management as a practice, this valuable thing that they've got going on over in digital SaaS. We should bring it into the back office, so to speak, or to the these less visible areas. And then you started hiring people who had a product background to work in these areas. And we said, okay, what does it even mean to apply product to this thing? Which is why when people who have a very strong like data mesh background are like, no, that thing you're doing isn't a data product according to this strict book, I'm just like, I kind of don't care. I don't care if what you think I'm doing isn't a data product. It is bringing product thinking to a data practice, and that's good enough for me. So did data mesh influence it or make it more acceptable to people who are advocates who maybe thought these product managers were going to build these monetizable data products or these, with a strict consumer and all these things? I mean, maybe. Yeah, maybe.
You've hit on one of my pet peeves, actually, which is a dashboard can't be a data product. Because a data product is a collection of data contracts, and that's what a data product is. And then I say, well, what's a data contract? And then it's like turtles all the way down, right?
Data contract, it's a SLE.
So like when a SaaS tool has a dashboard embedded natively within it, that's a product. There's a product team who built that within the product org.
Yeah.
Is that a data product? But if we use a third-party BI tool and it's only internal facing, suddenly it's not a data product. Like, none of this makes sense. Like, I just also don't care about being pedantic about it. It's just like, what value does it have for you in firmly defining what's a data product or not? I'm just saying, is it useful to think of this as a product? And my answer is always yes. I mean, if you're building dashboards internally, is it not useful to be user-centric, to think about design, to think about usability, to think about the user's mental model? Of course, all of that's usable and valuable. And I don't care if the data mesh people think all the stuff I do isn't data products. Like, my boss thinks they are, and my boss is happy. So
that's the true metric right there.
Right.
You're absolutely right, though. Like, it is a frustrating debate because who cares, right? It's the process the product thinking mindset and process that produces different outcomes than the traditional IT service mindset. That's important, right? And it's like we can call it whatever we want. I understand there's a certain segment of the population who desperately needs to have very hard boundaries between everything, and we can let them debate. The rest of us will get the work done.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. And data contracts are a great concept. And yes, there are certain types of data products I build where I bring up data contracts. Like if we have an in-production machine learning model inside of our mobile platform that patients are using, do I want to make sure that the upstream teams don't break that model? Yeah, I probably do. And data contracts are a great tool for that. So in that sense, the idea of data contracts being related to data products is useful. I'm just not interested in the rigidity around it.
Yeah. Agreed 100%. So, great question, Andrew. And Andrew also thought, great answer. So
I'll take it.
It was
Andrew is an expert in data contracts, so I'll take that, Andrew.
It was a great answer. I do. So one of the things, we kind of talked a little bit about your approach as a data product manager and the distributed data team that you guys have. And you used this term earlier, hub and spoke model. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean to you? And like, what does it look like in practice, this hub and spoke model? Who's responsible for building what, and how overall do you manage this?
Yeah, I would view it as the data platform, which is the hub in our business, needs to build the foundational building blocks that are needed for analytics and machine learning. Those building blocks vary and it evolves over time. Like I said, something that gets prototyped by an analyst that was at some point owned by them, we may decide to shift left so it has more support and scales better for broader teams, right? If one hub develops, for example, we have hardware at ResMed. We call them devices. And so one team wanted to understand how our devices ship, roll out across the world, and when we see them turn on, right? How we know a patient is actually using them after they've left the warehouse, because we distribute through home medical equipment companies. We don't sell direct to patients as much. We do in some markets. And so there was this desire for one team to understand more like that supply chain, that funnel of conversion from we built a thing and it became an activated thing, and where and when and how long that took. At the same time, there was the product org who's like, patients are their user, they're coming online, and how do we see how long that takes and where drop off happens? So both those people care about what we ended up calling a mark called device analytics, but for different reasons and different use cases. So at ResMed, we ended up building that centrally, but it could have been built, because if it was built by the product team, how was the supply chain team or other teams going to consume that same data model if it lived only within Tableau Cloud as a data source? And this other team's like, well, we use Power BI, or I need it in this other place. So the more things that are needed by multiple stakeholders outside of those different spokes, the more you might want to centralize it. Or the more critical something is, you might want version control, observability, more engineering around it. Then, like I say sometimes to the analysts, because analysts often don't want to give up their baby, right? They've built this thing and they're like, no, I built it well. I'm like, I'm not saying you didn't build it well. I'm saying if you built it so well that we want to make sure that when you go on paternity leave, it doesn't die, right? Or when you win the lottery, or when you get another job. And we want to make sure it has the right documentation, that people are consuming and using it properly. Also, it's really useful. And this pipeline you built, there are intermediary parts other people might want to branch off of. So it's not firm. It's not easy. There will still be, I'm not going to call it turf wars, but different visions over who should own what pieces of the process. And what I try to say is just like, I try to really just deal with it case by case. And we are doing things like, we don't have a data management office. We don't have a centralized data governance function. Governance is, we have pieces we own as the data platform. We have pieces the spokes own because they're close to the business, who are the decision makers. So governance is more, we're experimenting with things like a governance council and tackling different topics and figuring out like, okay, we define the metadata standard. These are the fields we need so we can understand and manage your data at scale. But that data has to be populated by people out in the business, the source system teams or the analysts. So it's not, I would say when I was an analyst, I wished the whole team was centralized, because it's better for the career path of analysts if they're working in a tight team where there's clear, like often if you're an analyst in this team embedded over here, it's a dead end. Like there's nowhere else for you to go. You can't get promoted, like other than becoming your boss, becoming the leader of the analytics team. So there's pros and cons to every model. But if you are doing hub and spoke, I think you have to be very intentional about building a cohesive vision. And I would say this is a process we're still on at ResMed, making sure those embedded teams and myself, and it's a lot of one-on-one conversations, being like, hey, I think we should centralize this. This is why. This is how I think it'll be better. And getting to that aha moment, or them saying, no, it's not a good idea. Things are changing too fast and you need to be closer to the business to manage this thing. And it's just about really good communication and listening and approaching it as partnership. And when people get territorial, I tend to just be like, look, there's enough work for all of us. I'm not coming after this because I need more work. Like this is really something I just want to make sure it's robust and can scale.
I mean, there's something you said in there when you were talking about, dealing with the analysts and talking to them and saying, hey, you built this thing. And the reason that we want to move it into the centralized team is not because you did it wrong. It's because you did it so right.
Yep.
That it's like being called up to the major leagues almost.
Yeah.
And man, it's like that would just be so powerful if we could foster a culture of that sort of thinking about data in these distributed environments, where my goal as an analyst is to build something so awesome that it gets handed off. It's so important that it gets handed off to the centralized team. Now, I know not everybody's always going to think that way because they are territorial and, it's hard to give up work that you built. But I think it's just such a powerful way to think about it as like, there's the proving grounds. And when something is good enough and important enough like that, you should get recognition for that. That should be like a, wow, great job that the centralized team had. It was so good that we had to give it to the engineers.
Plus, we have so many other uncovered things we need you to go mine for. Like, stop babysitting this thing. Like, go find the next thing that we need. Like, build more cool models, dig into more raw data, uncover more things. There's so much untapped potential that, but I mean, some of that is about the soft skills, right? When we take it on, we bring them into the meeting and say, hey, we think we understand from your documentation, this is how we're going to scale it. Did we get anything wrong? Where are we missing? What do we not understand? And then when you launch it, saying, hey, shouting out and saying, this person came up with this thing. Now it lives centrally. Other people can use this now, and making sure people get credit. Those small things really make a big difference.
So we do have a question from Paul here. How's the relationship between the AI ML model build teams and the data team? The AI ML teams like to own all their own data for efficiency. That's one reason.
So Paul, like I said, Paul was at ResMed recently, so he knows all the inside baseball of how this is working.
Right. I sense there's something hidden in this question that Eric and I are not privy to.
I would say we think about this right now in one way, which is promote them to a PM. The AI/ML teams, I think about it as two different ways. There's the team that builds the platform that allows us to experiment and move models to production. And that is two different swim lanes, right? So fast, rapid experimentation, you use whatever data you want, right? Here's the warehouse, here's your sandbox, grab anything you want. It's that rapid prototyping, fast learning phase. That's great. When we move things into production, they start being exposed and having business impacts on individual users, or, if we're going to implement a machine learning model that affects our supply chain planning, we want to make sure that data is robust. And that's where we might say, great, this is the data you found. We're going to validate that. We're going to build a MART. We're going to build a dedicated view. We're going to add data contracts and layer these things on top. So how are we going to send that alerting? So actually the AI/ML platform at ResMed used to be separate and actually sat within the data science business unit, which made sense because they were supporting all the work of those data scientists. We have now pulled them in with the data platform because it's really about how the overall data platform and their mini platform with these added capabilities for, and it actually is a collaboration with DevX as well, right? They're managing the Kubernetes cluster, they're managing the compute. The AI/ML platform is managing things like model serving, notebooks, like how all these things function together. And my team is saying, when you consume data, here's all the data you can have. And then we're talking about things right now. We have not figured this out yet, which is like they're building a new feature store for each model, right? They start from raw data and build a feature store. But really, once we've developed a useful feature, might we not want to make that available to other models? And so there's maybe some work to do there. But yeah, people want to own everything. That's actually a very common thing with data teams, not just AML teams. They want to go to raw data all the way and own the whole supply chain, because that's how they feel confident and trust what they've done, because they've gone all the way back to raw. But what we want people to understand is sometimes it takes a lot of time to understand the data well enough to use it correctly. And you might not want to do that all the time, right? Go all the way back. But they're not going to trust what we build unless we document it well and build that trust of like, hey, we found all these edge cases. Here's the ways we handled that, right? A lot of that's often just embedded in code, but you didn't document it. But if you want someone else to say, hey, I built this useful thing, you might want to use it. And they have to answer to their boss about what that part does, right? As part of the broader thing, you better be transparent about it. And so it's not necessarily that teams want to be secretive and hide this stuff, but it takes extra work to be transparent about it. And you have to build it and bake it into the system so someone can vet your work and say, okay, I trust this enough. And then ideally, if they put a critical dependency on you, they tell you not to change that. And that's an ongoing thing that we talk about. Dependencies and ownership and contracts, and we're still figuring it out.
Yeah. How is AI changing things in your world now?
Well, I have to say I'm really proud of ResMed. For as old of a company as ResMed is and where we're at on our digital transformation journey, they really jumped fast into vetting Gen AI technology. I mean, ResMed has been doing AI/ML within the data science unit for a very long time. But when these Gen AI productivity tools came along, they could have taken a really fear-based approach. But what they did is initially they said we could use these tools, but we couldn't feed any team data into it. And there was an alert that came up anytime you went to like chatgpt.com that was like, don't feed company data to this. So I could only use it very in sparse use cases because I couldn't feed anything proprietary. Only if it was like the information's already public or is this generalized research, but if it was like actual work. Then ResMed did a pilot. I volunteered for that. That was back in February. They also adopted Microsoft Copilot for the Office suite. And then we have ChatGPT, and we also have GitHub Copilot for our dev teams. And so they've taken a pilot approach. We've tried these tools. We saw how much ROI we got. Our data science team actually did like surveys and evaluations to say it takes X number of hours to pay for this license to pay for itself, because it's not cheap, right? ChatGPT Enterprise is something like $700 a year per user. I would say I'm an early adopter. I'm actually presenting to our data science guild in a couple weeks about how I use AI at work for my personal productivity. So I developed a custom GPT once I had access to the right tool that helps me develop product requirements documents in a standard format. So I just brain dump at it, right? After I've met with someone, I kind of understand what we need to build. I work on that document. Then I copy and paste that markdown into Confluence, and I send the Confluence page back to the stakeholder and say, you said this is what I heard. Correct me, let's tweak it together. Then I send it to privacy and legal for review. So AI just helps me build faster. I use it for research. I use it every day. And Copilot for Teams is it's not as mature, but what it's really good at is it has access to all of OneDrive. Ours has access to Confluence. So it's like knowledge management. People love code names. I hate code names in the business. It's like, oh, Project Dragonfly. And I'm like, what? Why would I know what that means? No one knows what that means. And that AI is super useful for them. They're like, oh, Project Dragonfly, here's this document that explains it. And here's the top 3 people who are working on it. So it's actually very useful in a big business for locating people. And then of course, all the, if you can't attend a meeting, those AI generated notes by Copilot and stuff. So ResMed's really adapting quickly for a business of its stage and size. And the bigger thing, I guess the bigger open question is me looking at these tools and saying, what are all the opportunities and risks that come up as we start having less technical people using a tool like Excel with Python built into it to do data work for them. So traditionally, right, we have kind of a safeguard of they can't even get into the warehouse, so they couldn't mess up with the data. Now suddenly it's these tools are making it real easy for them to get data. Do they understand all the nuance? We're building with a persona of an analyst or somebody in mind. And now I need to build of like, how do I build guardrails or documentation or a semantic layer or things that help people get what they need, but not misuse data on accident. That's kind of what's top of mind for me.
Yeah, because the barrier to entry is
Lowering.
just so low compared to what it was 3 years ago, you know?
Which if I hand them only curated data sets, I'm like, hey, only hook up these tools to this mart we've built for you. Here's the documentation. This could be a really powerful, cool thing, right? But if they just access the raw stuff and they think they know it, they don't know what they don't know.
Right, exactly. Well, listen, this was a fascinating conversation, by the way. And I think a lot of like, I know you've said, we're like we're an older company, but I mean, the stuff you're describing is from at least a process and philosophy standpoint of how you're trying to run a data team, I think is at the forefront of the best thinking that we have right now. So like kudos to you and the rest of the ResMed team. Sounds awesome to me.
It's a good place. So when we're hiring, come work for us.
Yeah. That's anybody looking for a job, hit up Anna when the time comes. So last question, we're at the top of the hour here. So I think we could probably go for a long time. But we'll wrap it up here. This is the final question. It's the question we ask everybody at the end of the show. And that is, what piece of advice do you have for a young person entering the data field today, or maybe somebody trying to make a career transition into data? What's the most important thing they should focus on?
It's interesting. I had a coffee chat with an MBA student at my alma mater who reached out this week. And so I actually was just like having a chat with him that's kind of like this. He's actually looking into product management, but he has a software engineering background, but he wants to, is interested in this more like technical product management, the intersection of maybe data and technical stuff. I would say it has always been true that like the technology moves fast, but it's moving faster than ever. And you can't really be complacent. And you need to stay up on it. I would also say, as somebody who has worked with people fresh out of college who joined a data team, to be humble and realize that technical skills aren't everything. And just because you've aced your technical skills and you're just like killing it at like Python and R and the BI tools and you're like, why am I not getting promoted? Data is about more than just the technical execution. And it's really find a mentor, really understand, lean into the soft skills, figure out communication, and be active on LinkedIn. When I was talking to this college student and he's like, really? Like I should post on LinkedIn? And I'm like, look, I'm not saying go on there and pretend you have 30 years of experience. I'm saying go on there and say, hey, we did this case study this week and here's this interesting thing I learned. Comment on other people's stuff. Like there's a lot of valuable, if you just stay in your silo, in your little company and just try to grow your career there, it's kind of not enough. Things are moving too fast. Like be part of the broader conversation, be humble about your maturity and where you're at, and be excited about what's next, but be patient because it doesn't just happen overnight.
Awesome. Well, Anna, thank you so much for coming on the show. That's great advice. Where can people find you?
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the only place I am. I have a gardening account on Instagram, but the only place I talk about is on LinkedIn.
That's a different podcast that you guest on. We're not. I'm not qualified to cover that one. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a real pleasure to have you. And I follow Anna on LinkedIn, folks. I think her LinkedIn is just full of wisdom for how to run a modern data team. I think it's great. So be sure to connect with her and follow her there. And thanks for joining us today.
Good to see you guys. Have a good day.
All right, man. They're like doing some advanced stuff there. Like process wise, I'm super impressed. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's it sounds like what we're doing in 6 years.
So listen, folks, thank you for joining us. Of course, we are the Super Data Brothers. We broadcast most Thursdays at this time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. Join us next week, November 14th at 12 p.m. Eastern for a chat with Matt Housley. Will be joining us, co-author of what the hell's the name of that book? The big data engineering one.
Yeah, data engineering.
That one. I'm blanking on the name of it, with Joe Reese.
Yeah.
So Matt will be joining us. Longtime guest on the show. It's always awesome when Matt's here. So
Yeah.
tune in for that. I want to thank
Fundamentals
Anna
of
again.
data engineering.
Fundamentals of thank you. Fundamentals of data engineering. Jeez. I want to thank Anna again for joining us. Awesome chat. Great guest. Connect with her on LinkedIn. And until next week, folks, we are the Super Data Brothers. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.